The church doors flew open with a thunderous bang as Ian stormed down the aisle, his heart pounding like a war drum. "Dad, stop this wedding right now," he shouted, the words echoing off the stained glass windows as all eyes turned to him in shock. Sunlight poured through the tall panes, painting the wooden pews in bright patches of red and gold, but the joy that should have filled the air vanished in an instant. Guests in crisp suits and pastel dresses froze mid-clap. At the altar, his father David stood tall in a tailored black tuxedo, Karen beside him in flowing ivory lace, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Ian's breath came in short bursts. He had driven through Chicago traffic like a man possessed, the printed emails burning a hole in his jacket pocket. This was not how he planned to spend his Saturday, but secrets this big could not stay buried any longer. 3 months earlier, Ian had been sitting in his downtown apartment, laptop open, trying to finish a client logo when his phone buzzed with a text from his dad. "Can you swing by the house? Need help with the old computer before the wedding." Ian had groaned, but gone anyway, the dutiful son he had always tried to be. David was in the backyard grilling steaks, laughing with Karen on the phone about honeymoon plans. Ian had opened the laptop to clear some cache like asked, and there it was, an email folder labeled personal that should have been password protected. One click, and Ian's world cracked open. Messages from a man named Alex, words of longing, late-night plans, even a photo of David smiling in a way Ian had never seen, soft and unguarded. "I wish I could tell my son the truth," one email read. "But he looks up to me as the strong, traditional man he needs." Ian had stared until the screen blurred, his stomach twisting. His own father, the man who had drilled "be a real man" into him since Little League, was living the very lie Ian fought every day. Ian had always known he was different. At 28, working as a graphic designer in a bright Lincoln Park studio, he had built a life that looked perfect from the outside. But inside, the weight of hiding who he loved pressed heavier each year. Max had been his best friend since freshman year at Northwestern, the guy who could make him laugh during all-nighters, and who later became so much more. Their first kiss had happened on a rainy rooftop after finals, tentative and electric. For 2 years they kept it quiet, stolen weekends in Max's Wicker Park loft, whispered promises that Ian always pulled back from. "My dad would never understand," Ian had said the night he ended it 6 months ago. Max's dark eyes had filled with hurt. "You mean you don't understand yourself yet?" The words still stung. Now, standing in the aisle with every relative staring, Ian felt that same fear clawing at his throat, but something stronger pushed him forward: truth. He reached the front pews and pulled the folded papers from his pocket. "Everyone listen. This wedding can't happen." His voice cracked, but held. Karen's face paled. David stepped forward, eyes wide with warning. "Ian, what are you doing?" Ian unfolded the pages, the printed proof shaking in his grip. The organist had stopped playing. A baby cried somewhere in the back. Ian glanced once at the crowd and saw Max standing 3 rows back, his architect's button-down crisp, face frozen in surprise. Their eyes met for a split second, and that old spark ignited again. Ian looked back at his father. "Dad, I found these. Emails to Alex. You've been lying to all of us for years." Gasps rippled through the church like a wave. Karen dropped her bouquet. David opened his mouth, but no sound came. In that moment, Ian realized he was not just exposing his father. He was finally exposing himself. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Ian's mind raced through every family dinner where David had talked about settling down with a good woman. Every awkward holiday when relatives asked why Ian was still single. He had swallowed it all, dating girls in college just to keep the peace, smiling through the guilt. Max had been the only one who saw the real him, the man who loved late-night talks about design and dreams of traveling to New York together. But Ian had pushed Max away to protect the image his father demanded. Now that image was shattering in front of 200 guests. Ian's chest tightened with a mix of terror and relief. He had come here to stop a lie, but he had no idea the avalanche he was about to trigger. David's face turned ashen. "Son, this isn't the place." Ian cut him off, voice rising. "It has to be the place. You've spent my whole life telling me to be honest, to be strong. But you're standing here promising forever to Karen while texting another man about how you can't live without him." Karen's hand flew to her mouth. An aunt in the front row whispered loudly, "Oh my God." Ian's hands shook harder. He had rehearsed this drive over 100 times, but nothing prepared him for the raw pain in his father's eyes. Still, he could not stop. The truth had been choking him too long. "I can't watch you build another life on secrets. Not when I've been living one too." The words hung there, heavier than the chandeliers above. Ian felt the shift in the room, the way people leaned forward, the way Max took one involuntary step into the aisle. For the first time in years, Ian did not look away. He had crossed the line, and there was no going back. Karen's bouquet lay scattered on the marble steps, white petals bright against the dark wood. "David, is this true?" she asked, her voice small in the vast church. David stared at Ian, the man who had coached his little league teams and taught him to tie a tie, now looking like a stranger. "Ian, you don't understand," David started, but the words died when Ian thrust the papers forward. Guests murmured. Phones stayed politely in pockets, but eyes recorded every second. Ian's pulse thundered in his ears. He had expected anger, maybe denial, but not this sudden hollow look on his father's face. It was the same expression Ian saw in the mirror every morning when he thought about Max. "I do understand," Ian said, stepping closer. "I read every email. The trips to Milwaukee you called business. The way you told Alex you wished you could introduce him to your son. You preached family values while hiding who you are. How could you do that to Mom? To me?" The mention of his late mother sent a ripple through the family's side. Aunt Linda clutched her pearls. Ian's cousin Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had been the one who once joked that Ian needed a real girlfriend at Thanksgiving, the joke that had cut deeper than anyone knew. David reached for Karen's hand, but she pulled away, tears already tracing mascara down her cheeks. "I need air," she whispered and hurried toward the side door, her veil trailing like a broken flag. The officiant cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should pause," but Ian was not done. The adrenaline that had carried him through the doors now mixed with something sharper, his own truth demanding to be freed. He turned slightly, eyes finding Max again. Max had not moved, but his expression had softened from shock to something warmer, something Ian had missed every single day since their breakup. "And there's more," Ian said, voice steadier now. "I've spent years pretending I could be the son you wanted. Pretending I didn't love someone who made me feel alive." He looked straight at Max. "Max, I'm sorry I pushed you away. I'm gay. And I love you." The church erupted. Whispers turned to outright gasps. Jake's face went red. He had been Ian's roommate in college and had once walked in on a too-close moment between Ian and Max, then sworn to keep quiet, but clearly had not. Emily, Ian's loyal co-worker and only real confidant, stood up from the back and gave a small nod of support. Max took another step forward, his dark eyes shining. "Ian." For a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, the man who had waited patiently, the man who had finally found his voice. David's shoulders sagged. "Ian, please. Not like this." But the damage was done. The wedding planners signaled the musicians to stop. Guests began standing, some heading for the doors, others pulling out phones in disbelief. Karen reappeared at the side entrance, coat over her dress, face streaked. "David, call me when you figure this out," she said quietly before slipping away. The ceremony was over before the vows even began. Ian stood at the altar steps, papers still in hand, feeling the weight of every secret he had carried lift slightly. His father looked smaller somehow, the strong man from childhood memories cracking in real time. Yet beneath the chaos, Ian felt a strange calm. He had risked everything, and in the middle of the wreckage, Max was still there, walking toward him now. Outside, the Chicago spring breeze carried the scent of blooming lilacs from the church garden. Ian stepped into the sunlight first, Max right behind. "You didn't have to do that for me," Max said softly, voice thick. Ian turned, the papers fluttering in the wind. "I didn't do it just for you. I did it for both of us. And maybe for him too." They stood close, not touching yet, but the space between them felt electric with possibility. Sirens of gossip would spread fast, family group chats already blowing up, but in that moment, Ian breathed easier than he had in years. The wedding was stopped. The secret was out. Now the real work began. David emerged last, tie loosened, face pale. We need to talk, son. Ian nodded. The confrontation was far from over, but for the first time, Ian was not running from it. The reception hall next door stood empty, tables set with untouched centerpieces of white roses and candles that would never be lit. Ian sat on the steps outside, Max beside him, the city traffic humming in the distance. David paced the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, the tuxedo jacket now draped over one arm. How long have you known? David asked finally, voice rough. Ian looked up. 3 months. Long enough to realize you've been living the same double life I was trying to escape. David stopped pacing. The sun caught the silver in his hair, making him look every one of his 55 years. Your mother knew, you know. Before she passed. She said she wanted me to be happy, but I couldn't do it to you. I thought if I showed you the right path, you'd never have to struggle like I did. Ian laughed bitterly, the sound surprising even him. The right path? Dad, I spent college dating girls I didn't care about because I was terrified you'd look at me the way you're looking at me now. I lost Max because I was scared. Max's hand brushed Ian's knee, a silent anchor. David glanced at Max, really seeing him for the first time as more than just Ian's college buddy. Max. I had no idea. Max shrugged, voice calm. We kept it quiet. For Ian. The three of them stood in the awkward silence of truths finally spoken. Ian felt the years of tension unraveling thread by thread. That night, back at Ian's apartment, the city lights twinkled through the windows like distant stars. Max stayed, not leaving even when Ian offered him the couch. They sat on the floor with takeout Thai food, talking until the sky turned pink. Ian recounted every moment he had doubted himself. The high school prom he skipped because he couldn't imagine slow dancing with a girl, the family vacations where David pushed him towards sports and girls. Max shared his own story, growing up in a loud Puerto Rican family in Humboldt Park that had accepted him the day he came out at 17. I waited for you because I knew the real you was worth it, Max said, reaching for Ian's hand. Their fingers laced together, warm and sure. For the first time, Ian did not pull away. The next week brought the fallout. Aunt Linda called twice, voice clipped, asking if Ian was sure and suggesting therapy. Jake texted once, Dude, you really had to blow up the wedding? Ian deleted the message. Emily came over with coffee and a hug. I'm proud of you, she said simply. David called on Thursday. Can we meet? Just us. They chose a quiet cafe near the lake, the kind with outdoor tables where the wind off Michigan carried away heavy words. David arrived early, 2 coffees already on the table. I ended things with Alex the day after the wedding, he said without preamble. Karen. She deserves better than half a man. Ian stirred his drink, watching the foam swirl. And what about you? David looked out at the water. I'm tired of pretending. Maybe it's time I figure out who I am too. They talked for hours. David admitted the pressure he had put on Ian came from his own fear. The fear of losing the respect of his brothers, his colleagues at the firm, the community that still whispered about family values. Ian told him about the nights he had cried after pushing Max away, the therapy sessions he had started last year in secret. When they stood to leave, David pulled Ian into a hug that felt different, less like a command, more like an apology. I'm sorry I made you hide, David whispered. Ian felt something inside his chest loosen further. Back home, Max waited with dinner on the table. How'd it go? Ian smiled for the first time in days. Better than I expected. They ate, then moved to the couch, Max's arm around Ian's shoulders. The kiss that followed was slow, full of the months they had lost, but it carried no rush, only the quiet promise of tomorrow. Ian pulled back just enough to look into Max's eyes. I don't want to hide anymore. Max grinned. Good. Because I'm taking you to Pride next month, and we're marching front row. Life did not magically fix itself. Work emails piled up, relatives still sent awkward texts, and David canceled the honeymoon deposit with quiet dignity. But Ian woke up each morning lighter. He redesigned his studio logo with bolder colors, a small rebellion. He introduced Max officially to Emily over brunch. And slowly, the man who had crashed a wedding began to build something real. 2 weeks later, the misunderstanding that had simmered beneath the surface finally boiled over. Jake showed up at Ian's door unannounced, baseball cap pulled low, hands stuffed in his hoodie. We need to talk, man. Ian let him in, but kept the door open. Max was in the kitchen making coffee, but he stayed out of sight. Jake paced the living room. Look, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Back in college, I saw you and Max. You know, I told your dad once when he asked why you never brought girls home. I thought I was helping. Ian's stomach dropped. So that was the source, the offhand comment that had planted the seed of doubt in David's mind all those years. You told him? Ian asked, voice flat. Jake nodded. I figured he'd rather know. But I never thought he'd push you so hard. The betrayal stung sharper than Ian expected. Jake had been the friend who covered for him during late nights, the one who had joked about Ian's mysterious roommate. Now that same friend had been the crack in the wall Ian built to protect himself. You had no right, Ian said quietly. Jake looked down. I know. Families are supposed to be honest, right? Ian laughed without humor. Honest. Like how you kept quiet until it suited you. The conversation ended with Jake leaving, shoulders slumped, promising to give Ian space. Ian closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Max appeared, handing him a mug. You okay? Ian nodded. I will be. Just another piece of the puzzle. That weekend, Ian and Max drove to the lakefront for a walk, the city skyline sharp against the blue sky. They talked about everything, the rifts, the loyalty that had held, the friendships that might not survive. Emily met them for ice cream, her laugh cutting through the tension. Family isn't always blood, she said. Sometimes it's the people who stay. Ian felt the truth of that. Max squeezed his hand right there on the path, no longer hiding. A few passers-by glanced, but most smiled. Chicago in spring felt kinder than it had in years. David called again on Monday. I spoke with Jake. He told me everything. There was a long pause. I was wrong to put that pressure on you. I thought I was protecting you from what I went through. Ian listened, the old anger softening into understanding. They met for lunch downtown, the conversation easier this time. David shared stories Ian had never heard. His own college years, the relationship he ended because his father threatened to cut him off. I swore I'd never do that to you, David said. But I did it anyway, just quieter. Ian reached across the table. We both made mistakes. But we're fixing them now. The weeks turned into months. Ian started seeing a therapist openly, learning to quiet the voice that still whispered he was not enough. Max moved more of his things into the apartment, sketchbooks, coffee mugs, the framed photo of them at graduation. One evening, as they cooked pasta together, Max said, I never stopped believing in us. Ian turned off the stove and pulled him close. Neither did I. The kiss tasted like garlic and second chances. Societal pressure still appeared in small ways. A client's raised eyebrow when Ian mentioned his boyfriend, a distant cousin unfollowing him on social media. But Ian answered every question with calm honesty. He even posted a simple photo of him and Max at the lake. Caption, finally living my truth. The likes and messages poured in, some supportive, some silent. Through it all, Max stood steady. David began his own quiet journey. He joined a support group for men his age coming out later in life. Karen sent a card saying she understood and wished him well. The family slowly adjusted, some relatives warmer than others. Ian realized acceptance was not a single moment, but 1,000 small ones. The real turning point came on a humid July evening. Ian stood in his father's backyard, the same grill from months ago now cold. David had invited him and Max for dinner, just the three of them. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and charcoal. David flipped burgers with the same focus he once used on board meetings. I told the partners at work, David said suddenly. Ian nearly dropped his beer. What did they say? David shrugged. Some were surprised. Others didn't care. One guy even hugged me. He looked at Ian and Max. Watching you two. It made me realize I didn't want to waste any more time. Ian felt the last knot in his chest untie. They ate under string lights, talking about everything and nothing. Max's latest building project, Ian's new client, David's plans to travel to see Alex again, this time openly. When dessert came, David raised his glass. To honesty, even when it hurts. They clinked, and Ian caught Max's eye across the table. The look held everything they had survived. Later that night, walking home through quiet streets, Max stopped under a street lamp. You changed everything that day in the church. Ian smiled. We changed everything. They kissed right there, soft and sure, the kind of kiss that promised forever without needing words. Ian thought about the boy who had hidden in plain sight, the man who had finally spoken. Growth was messy, but it was his. The summer unfolded with small victories. Ian marched in pride with Max and Emily, rainbow flags waving under a perfect sky. David watched from the sidelines, waving proudly. Jake sent a long apology text. Ian replied with an invitation to coffee. Not all bridges rebuilt, but enough did. Ian started volunteering at a local LGBTQ youth center, sharing his story so no kid felt as alone as he once had. One quiet morning, Ian woke to Max making coffee, sunlight slanting across the kitchen. "Morning," Max said, sliding a mug over. Ian pulled him close. "Best morning yet." They stood there, wrapped in each other, the city waking outside. Ian had faced the worst and come out stronger. Love had not been the easy path, but it was the right one. Fall leaves turned the city gold and crimson. Ian and Max walked hand in hand along the lake path, the same route where everything had shifted months earlier. David joined them sometimes now, the three of them sharing stories like any other family. Ian had redesigned the firm logo for his biggest client yet, bolder and brighter, just like his life. Max's new project broke ground downtown, a building with wide windows and open spaces. "Room for everyone," Max had said with a grin. One crisp evening, they gathered at David's house for Thanksgiving. The table held turkey, sides, and laughter that felt real. No one asked Ian when he would settle down with a nice girl. Instead, they asked about Max's work, about Ian's volunteer days. David carved the turkey with steady hands. "I'm grateful for second chances," he said quietly. Ian met his father's eyes across the table and nodded. The past still lingered, but it no longer controlled them. After dinner, Ian and Max stood on the back porch under the stars. "Remember the church?" Max asked. Ian laughed softly. "Hard to forget." Max turned serious. "You taught me, and your dad, that love is worth the risk." Ian pulled him into a hug, the kind that said everything words could not. The man who once crashed a wedding had found his way home. As they drove back through the glowing streets, Ian looked at Max behind the wheel and felt complete. The journey had been painful, beautiful, and entirely theirs. In modern America, acceptance still took courage, but it was possible. Ian had lived it. True or false, revealing family secrets always destroys relationships, or can it lead to greater acceptance?